if we can, you know, if we optically, I think the 10 and 10 looks better, and I think it works better for the town. Massimo, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Jason, just for clarity, are you talking about when you're looking at the assessor's version of options 2 and 3?
I think either option,
Yeah,
the assessor's option, the abatement is actually less on her
correct.
analysis. So it's actually more favorable from a loss of revenue standpoint from our perspective based on Lynn's numbers.
Yes, and my understanding is between the two, the 10 and 5 and the 10 and 10 is about $250,000 difference. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I don't have I
Yeah,
have
I just looked at it. I think it's around there, and it's also in, I believe, Lynn's notes. I agree with you. I think there's not enough of a differentiation to really push hard for that. I would be in favor of. I would be in favor of, as we talked about last time, kind of approving the 10 and 10. I'd love to hear if there was any feedback from CubTech during last week's conversations, Rena, on when we proposed that option, what they said.
Yes, so I received a message from Dan that he had spoken to Vikram about the proposed option 3. He said he was not happy about it, and he thought that option 2 should be the lowest. They also told me that based on latest information they've received, Sachem Capital, who holds the debt on the property, should take title in 30 to 45 days. And they also confirmed to me that 5/25 is their due diligence deadline. So I just want to share all of that context with you.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think the difference should be like 25,000 between option 2 and 3. I believe, Lynn, can you comment on that? Because we're saying that based on the 2-year, the tax pay would be 3663, 351 with a 10-year freeze, the next 10 years at a freezing scale. And then Quebec's quote is 385 and the town 250, Lynn.
Yeah, so okay. So option 2, yeah, the taxes will be 3,663, 351. So if you compare that to option 3, I didn't put the differences in between those two figures, but sorry, hold on.
I think the difference between the two figures would be
It's 4
273,000.
million. It's 4,000,080. So it's the difference between the 3,000,006 and the 480. So it would be like around 400,000. I'm sorry.
417,000.
Yes, around there. Yep.
I mean, for my 2 cents, spreading that over 20 years isn't enough to move the needle to push for the 10 and 5.
I think one thing I want to say is we said this in our last meeting, but it's very hard to project what the value is going to be over time of the building. So, I mean, the CubTech value may have been a little higher. And I think Lynn did some, industry adjustments to it, so to speak.
I actually just used their numbers based on the fact that it is going to be kind of throwing, a dart at the wall. You don't know what the value is going to be, but because they were using consistent capital improvements over the 20-year period, I just went with the figure. I went with the figure that they used.
Right. And then you adjusted the mill rate, right?
I did. I trended the mill rate. Yes.
Yeah.
I also think that Lynn, you brought it up in your notes, and I think it's a good point that if we don't transact with this business, that there's a real possibility of the next owner of the property pushing for a tax appeal, lowering the tax assessment, And we do have, the possibility of a not-for-profit buying the property. Not that there's one in the works, but that's always, with a commercial space like that, that's always a possibility. And then it gets removed from the tax rolls altogether. So I think balancing all the equities here, there is a lot of benefit to the town of Trumbull to making this deal. I think we all agree that the straight 15-year deal is optically not great. I think the 10 and 10 is a reasonable compromise, and I'm certainly willing to hear everyone's thoughts on that. Mr. Massaro?
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy that, we did our own calculation of the cost, if you will, of a tax abatement agreement. So my understanding is that, Cub Tech is willing to do the 20 and 10, the 20-year abatement with 10 frozen upfront and then phasing in whatever the revaluation might be after that 10-year period. So I do have a motion prepared if we're ready to resolve this.
Before we do that, does anyone have any further comments or discussion? Otherwise, I'll let Mr. Massaro bring his motion to the floor. Maria?
In the agreement, will there be something regarding appeals that they can't appeal during this 20-year period?
That would be my expectation, but I'll throw it to Dan.
It's my job.
Okay.
It's-
Yeah,
Okay.
I brought up previously, I'd like to see that in the agreement. I mean, that's, obviously subject to discussion that, Dan can have with counsel for Cub Tech.
Okay, anything else? Otherwise, Mr. Massaro, floor is yours.
Before we go there, Mr. Chairman, if I could just address the question of building permits. And it's not addressed, and I know in Carl's motion, but the ordinance specifically prohibits the waiver of building permits. So, and I know they wanted that. I don't know, Rena, if you've had any discussion with them about that.
I have not. I don't get the sense that's going to be a make or break, but we can just say that the ordinance doesn't allow for it. I mean, if that's the legal determination or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think it's we're talking about really a few $1,000s and over the course of
Yeah.
the whole project, so it shouldn't be a breaker, but just so we're clear on it. Now I'll defer to Mr. Massaro.
Well, listen, the council has its unique powers with respect to any ordinance and any prohibitions in an ordinance. So I'll just leave that to the
Absolutely.
future. I'll leave that to the future if necessary. First things first.
Mhm.
All right, so I move to recommend a 20-year abatement agreement between the town of Trumbull and Cub Technologies, Inc., commencing with fiscal year 2025/2026, during which the real estate tax assessment on property known as 78 Merritt Boulevard, including subsequent improvements, will be fixed at the currently assessed rate of $3,691,100 through fiscal year 2034/2035, and which assessment on said property will be reassessed and phased in at equal installments over the fiscal years 2035/2036 through 2044/2045. This recommendation is conditioned upon Cub Technologies acquiring title to said property and approval by the Trumbull Town Council of the tax abatement agreement. I also added that the abatement agreement will not apply to personal property or any other real estate.
Can I just make one clarification? It's 75 Merritt Boulevard. I think you said 78. And when, And then Carl, if you have that in writing, would you send it to Gia?
Yeah, I can do that right now, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I said 78, but I wrote 75.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's very wordy, but I hope everybody understands. We do assess every October 1st, but this would fix it where we're at. And one of the points I think that we've discussed in committee previously is that although the purchase price is around 3.7 million, that's our assessed value. They're basically agreeing to pay tax on a fair market value of 5.2 million, which over the next 10 years, should this be executed, is somewhat of an advantage for us and kind of offset some of the break that we're giving.
Carl, I have a question regarding your motion, just so I
Sure.
know. When we get to the year 11, your motion said that they're going to reassess the property, and whatever that number is, we phase that number in over the next 10 years. Is that the intent, or is it whatever the assessed value is each year, they pay a percentage of that assessed value?
Well, I think the way I understand the proposal, however the building stands after the first 10 years, there'd be a revaluation, and that the assessment on that would get phased in over the next 10 years. My motion doesn't really address improvements that would be made in the second 10-year period. Is that your question?
Yeah, I mean, essentially your motion, and it may be what we ultimately agree to, is that there's a 10-year fixed and then another 10-year fixed, although it's phased in, right? So whatever the assessed value is in year 11, they're going to pay 80% of that, or sorry, 20% of that the year 11, and increase that by 20% until we get to the 20th year. I perhaps misunderstood the proposal that the property would be assessed each year, and whatever its assessed value is, they would pay a percentage of that increasing over the second 10-year period. I don't know that it makes a huge difference, but I just want to make sure.
I would ask through the chair, Rena, what she understands the ask was.
So I'm a little confused, but by what Jason's asking, but let me take a stab at this, okay? We have the set assessment for the first 10 years. Then there's a revaluation. And if there's an incremental tax increase based on the reval at the 10-year point, they pay 90% of the incremental increase in year 11, 80% of they save, I'm sorry, it's the flip-flop. They save 10% of the incremental increase the first, no, I was right. 90%, 80%, 70%, 60 down for the second 10 years. It's on the incremental tax growth from the reval. And then they phase that tax growth in over the 10 years. Am I explaining that right?
You're explaining it right. It's just that's a different concept than I understood the deal to be. I don't know that the numbers would make a huge difference either way, but if we're asked to explain it, I understood it that we fix the assessment for 10 years. Beginning year 11, the assessment isn't fixed. They just pay an increasing percentage of the assessed value over 10 years. So in year 1, they will get a 90% abatement, so they pay 10% of the tax, whatever the tax assessed is, over their base, right? And then that'll phase in over the next 10 years, so that at year 20, they are paying 100% of the assessed taxes based on the assessed value of the property.
So I'm going to say there's one caveat to that I understand. We don't necessarily reassess the property every year. So it gets reassessed at the 10-year, right? And
5 years.
It's every 5 years, Rena, that the
no. I mean, according to the agreement, what Carl just read, there would be a reassessment at the end of the freeze, right?
Yeah.
And then they would, whatever the tax growth is from there forward, based on our normal process, they would have a savings each year that would go down on the incremental tax growth.
But if they hit a reassessment date during that second 10 years, are they subject to that revaluation?
Yeah, that they are it's my understanding they would be subject to it, right? But they would have a savings against it for that period of time. So the taxes aren't frozen. The taxes then begin to appreciate or depreciate. Well, they appreciate, let's see, the value appreciates, right? And the assessment could appreciate. They have a discount on that for the following 10 years. It would go according normal course of whatever would happen with that building through the tax assessor, through the revals, if they.
Pros, Rena. Right at the good part. Okay, Rena is frozen, but I do think, Mr. Massaro, your resolution may need a clarification, because as you read it, there would be a revaluation at year 10, and then there would be, the declining benefit for the next 10 years. I just think we need to say subject to, normal tax procedures and revaluations in the normal.
Right.
Well, my response to that is we don't have Comtech here to explain their 10 and 10 proposal. I think they contemplate two fixed 10-year tax periods. The first being the complete freeze at the current assessment, during which they obviously intend to make improvements. I think the second set of years, they've agreed that to a second 10-year period of a phase-in tax. I mean, subject to talking to them, if they were here, they might take the position, yeah, that's what we want. We want tax certainty for the second 10 years. And we would, and they would accept the phase-in of the revaluation after the 10th year. I think that's what they were driving at. That's what my motion contemplates. And then again, at the end of the 20-year period, when the abatement agreement is completed, there would be another revaluation of whatever the property is worth as improved, whether the improvements occur in the first 10 years or the next 10 years.
Okay, that's
my thinking behind my motion.
That's fine, as long as we're all clear and agree to it. My next question becomes, in the off chance that at year 11, it's a revaluation, and for some reason it's less, like there's a precipitous decline in the value of the property, not likely to happen, but do we want to say that the tax base will never be lower than what the assessed value is in year 1? So that, again, it kind of goes with the waiving of tax appeals, that if the property lowers in taxes, they're going to want the benefit of that lower taxes and then phase that in over 10 years.
Does the ordinance address that, Dan? I think the ordinance might say something about not going below the.
I think it does, but I'll have to check it.
Okay.
But we can certainly put that in the agreement.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But just
I
so
think that should go in the agreement.
yeah, so we're clear. Just if I could, we're saying that whatever improvements they make to the property over that period of time, we're not going to tax. Is that essentially true?
I think that was the whole thrust of their
Yeah,
ask, is that they would be, they would have a fixed real estate tax expense for 10 years,
Right.
and then, whatever the reval is, they would begin to phase that in.
and then beyond that, it's a position here that they waive their right to a tax appeal going forward through this 20 years.
Yeah, to that point, Dan, I would say there shouldn't be any other assessment other than after year 10 until after year 20.
Well, I got that, but in after year 10, we're saying we're going to put a new number on it.
Yeah, we would do that there, and they would we would ask them to waive any appeal right to that. But if
Yes.
they did improvements anytime during years 11 through 20, or if the town did a 5-year reval, if I were them, I'd be very reluctant to waive any right of appeal if there's going to be multiple reassessments over the second 10-year period. I think they're looking for that certainty.
Can I address that through the chair? If you look at their spreadsheet proposal, you will notice in the column that they have the tax value frozen, right? For the first 10 years. But then you'll notice that they project potential growth in value each year, and they take a discount to that growth. And the growth is obviously projected because we went through that with Lynn earlier. We don't know exactly. So I don't, whatever the committee's comfortable with, I'm comfortable with, but I'm just making the point. If you look at how they projected growth in this next 10 years and a discount against the growth, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think you're saying the same thing I am.
Okay.
And I think what they did was try to present or figure out for themselves, and then present to us what tax savings they're going to incur over a 10-year period, or a 15 or a 20-year period.
So I
And-
worked with them on it. So I feel that whatever way we go is fine, but I think that it was my understanding working with them that we were projecting it and that they were getting a discount against the tax growth, whatever it was in that 10 years. So I just want to, whether we freeze the assessment for 10 years, what the second assessment, whether we just do our normal course of business, we just need to clarify. And I'm just sharing my understanding from my involvement.
Okay. Lynn, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, no, I'm just agreeing with Rena, what she's saying. When I did the spreadsheet calculation, that is exactly what they were doing. They were projecting what the growth would be on those improvements each year, and then they were basing their estimated tax on that. And I would say that, it should not go below the agreement should not go below the current value that it is now.
Right.
So that if the value does decrease in any reval year subsequent to the 10-year mark, that we should not be going below that.
Okay. Are we all talking the same language? I just want to make sure we're all in agreement.
I guess I'm not sure. My understanding is a 10-year freeze, and then in year 10, it gets revaled, and after that, they're treated like every other taxpayer, except they get their discount applied to the valuation. When you look at their Excel spreadsheet, they're clearly increasing the value every year.
Right.
So I don't think we're supposed to freeze it I don't think you're supposed to reval at 10 years and then keep that valuation for the next 10 years. I don't think that's correct. I think it's
That was my
for 10 years.
impression of it too, Michael.
Yeah,
And
I think it's freeze for 10 years. At year 10, they're treated like every other taxpayer except they get their discount applied to them over
Yes.
10% of your discount for not for 10 years.
yeah, Mr. Massaro, do you agree or disagree?
I don't necessarily disagree. Let's see. I guess I would have to, if the consensus is that they would face evaluations after 10 years, I guess maybe I don't really comprehend what discount they get in the second 10 years.
They're not getting a discount. Well, no, the discount is they don't have to, in year 11, they're only going to pay 10% of whatever their tax obligation, the tax increase is. And year 12, they're going to pay 20%
Of the
the,
tax increase,
correct.
right?
so I mean, that's the incentive, is that they have certainty on, or relative certainty on their tax liability once the value is determined. And it's not a deferral, it's a straight discount.
So if I could, are we anticipating then that the assessor is going to go out there annually and determine what has been added to the property and put a value on it?
It should follow the normal course of assessment if they make, in that second 10 years, as far as I understand.
But all right, so yes, if there are additions to the property, then once the CO is issued, the assessor goes out and Lynn, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The assessor's office goes out and puts a number on it, on the improvement. But then in that 10 years, there will be either one or two revals.
Correct. There would be two.
Your office would annually reassess improvements on any property where there's permits taken out and construction,
Yes.
right?
If there was improvements made, yes, we would.
So, I mean, if I were ComTech, obviously I'd do all my improvements in the first 10 years, so I wouldn't get tax increases in the second 20 years, but who knows after 10 years what they might do or need to do, etc.
Which is kind of why I feel that you probably should hold them to that 20-year, improvement schedule so that the improvements don't end up aging. I mean, they will have some age to them, but I'm just saying that the value you're going to end up seeing depreciation on over time if they stop making those improvements. A lot more rapid depreciation.
So is the belief then that after the 10-year period, we should simply say the next, thereafter, the property will be assessed in the normal course? I don't really know how to.
Well, I would say assess in the normal course. However, the taxpayer will receive an abatement on the tax increase on a declining scale over the next 10 years.
Yes.
Except that in year 15, if they do some improvements, they don't get 10 more years for that.
No, why should they? I mean, that's the point is that and I think Michael said it very well, at least how I understood it, was that they get a 10-year special deal of a tax freeze or an assessment freeze, which gives them certainty for 10 years. And then at year 11, they're treated like any other taxpayer, but they only have to pay a small percentage of the increase each year, or an increasing amount each year over the next 10 years, 10%. And perhaps I mean, I think I can kind of see the smoke about the 5-year revaluations, and so
Yeah, that was my other question. We do a reval every 5 years. So what we're saying, we're freezing that value, even though, no.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, where I was going is if the deal is as Michael articulated, and I tend to think his articulation is how I understood it. Are we being somewhat onerous when we prevent them from appealing subsequent revaluations in the normal course? I mean, maybe not, since they're only paying a percentage of the tax increase during that last 10-year period. So if in year 15, there's a reval and the property value spikes, they're still only paying, they'd probably be at 40% discount at that point.
No discount.
Without it, they'd be paying the full boat. So yeah. I mean, I think what Michael said was just what I was trying to say. So I totally agree. That's my understanding of it. And whatever, and Lynn made a point about ongoing improvements. I mean, their business is going to morph and evolve, so we don't know exactly, they have to project out 20 years of improvements. It's hard to know. But my guess is, judging by, how they've treated their business this last 20 years, they've continued to grow and invest. So, if the past is a predictor of the future, I think they're going to continue to grow and invest.
And Rena, since you've had the discussions with them, does the interpretation that Michael articulated kind of fit with how you feel the conversations went? Or are they expecting what Mr. Monroe's motion
I
said?
believe Michael reiterated exactly what I said, if I'm not mistaken. I referred to the spreadsheet. They projected the growth and a discount to that growth in the normal course. Now, if their attorney gets involved and has other ideas for them to push harder, I don't know. But that seems to be what their spreadsheet says and what my understanding is. Now, the whole thing about, can they have appeals to their I haven't had that discussion with them. So I don't know what their thinking is on that.
Well, we'll just address it, I think, and see where they come back. I don't think
Yeah.
we don't have to have that discussion with them up front. I guess the other question I would have is, what happens if they don't make it for the 20 years? They're out of business.
Then it goes away. I mean,
Well, it goes away. Are we going to recoup that?
Are we going to ask for any repayment if they don't?
Is that going to become a lien on the land records? That somebody else takes the property over, they owe us the amount that's been deferred or forgiven.
Well, I think it would have to be a sort of a prorated amount, because we would have received some benefit from them being here for a period of time. So if they, let's say, left town in year 12, we would have to figure out a way to calculate a fair clawback of amounts received, right? Because presumably we're receiving some benefit from them being here for a period of time. I mean, looking at, so in the option 2, right, I'm looking at let me share, we're looking at the right table here. On Lynn's version of 2, over 20 years, they're abating $1,346,938 of property taxes. So Dan's point is that if they don't fulfill their 20-year obligation to the town, should we be able to recoup some portion of that 1,346,000 and have that be a lien on the property, so that when they sell, we have the ability to collect. Anyone?
I don't have an answer for that, but 20 years from now is a long time. So maybe there's a point at which somewhere along the way, after a certain point, they, if they leave before the 10-year period or something, they have to pay claw back. I mean, I don't know what, I haven't
right? If they
seen
leave,
that.
they owe us more money, or maybe not. That doesn't make sense. Anyway,
So
well,
if they sell the building, let's say they're not, it already says, like in previous agreements, if they sell the building, the tax benefit doesn't transfer, right? So that whoever buys it will have to pay full taxes on it. At a certain point, I mean, they've been here, they've stabilized the property, they've operated here. I don't know. What do you see, Jason, in your other deals that you do?
well, one of the deals that I've done, there was a specific provision in the agreement that said if you sold it to a nonprofit, there would be a clawback because you're taking it off the tax rolls at that point.
Right. That's a good one.
So that is perhaps something we want to think about including in the agreement. But I agree, there's some, after some point, perhaps Trumbull feels like it's gotten the benefit of its bargain and maybe a clawback isn't, appropriate, but there should be some disincentive to Cubtech to leaving before the 20 years. Just my opinion.
I like the idea of putting this, if they try to sell it to a nonprofit, there's a clawback. I think that's really important. And maybe at the 10-year mark, if they leave before 10 years, there's a clawback. I mean, after that, they're, starting to pay in, each year a little bit more, and the property's value has shifted and changed and that kind of thing.
Okay. Mr. Massaro, you have a contemplative look.
I'm still thinking about how to word the second 10-year period. I agree with all the other thoughts, which could be part of the agreement in terms of clawback. I leave that to the attorneys to figure out. It could lead to some interesting discussion, but maybe I through the chair and ask Mike, how would you word the second 10-year period that the property would be reassessed after the 10 years in the normal course, and any increases in assessment value would be phased in during the remainder of the 10-year period? I guess that's what I'm really struggling with, trying to figure the right words to that.
Michael has gone dark.
Well, maybe I just said it. So in my motion, I said which assessment on said property will be reassessed and phased in at equal installments for fiscal years 2035, et cetera, through 2044. And I guess I would have to change that to basically say which assessment will be then reassessed.
The property will be reassessed in the normal course, and subsequent increases in assessment will be phased in equal installments over the period through and including fiscal year, whatever that last fiscal year is, 35, 30, 34, 35. Is that what you said? Lynn, you have your hand raised while Carl's tinkering.
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest maybe offering a conveyance penalty like they do for PA 490. So if they exit, you could do something to that effect.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You kind of cut out on my end here.
Yeah, so I was just thinking another option is implementing a conveyance penalty. So if they exit before the 20 years, you could apply a conveyance penalty.
I mean, that's essentially what we're contemplating. How is the conveyance penalty is calculated? Is it just a number, or is it?
Well, there's a percentage of tax that they have to pay, it's sales tax that they have to pay once they convey, but there could be an additional penalty on top of that.
Well, that's statutory, though. I don't. Yeah, I mean your state and municipal conveyance taxes are set. I don't know that you can add to those numbers, but you can charge, basically charge them an exit fee. What you're saying?
It would be separate and apart from the conveyance tax.
Yeah, right. Because you can't waive conveyance taxes or penalties on them. I'm sure you can't add to them either.
Just on a time issue, Gia and I have a major event we're hosting shortly. We have about
How major is it, Rena?
Well, we've got about probably close to 100 people coming to the corporate park. And David Corus, who's the executive director of the Connecticut Redevelopment Agency, speaking. So we have to leave to go set up in about 15 minutes. Oh, gee, probably 10 to 15 minutes. Just, I don't want to pressure anyone, but just, I don't want to be rude if we just jump off. Can I just ask, Vicky texted me this morning and she asked if anyone from CupTech was coming tonight to the committee meeting, and I had not, Carl, invited anyone. And I don't know your and Jason's thoughts on tonight, or if just the full council meeting was appropriate, or
I don't know that tonight is important. I would expect probably that this would get passed without recommendation. Just, it's a small committee, and I don't know that Chairman Pifko and his caucus have had a chance to talk about this. I haven't talked to Ashley who's the only other member on our side of that committee. So probably I would expect it to get passed without recommendation.
Okay, do you feel on the town council meeting they should be there?
I would think so, yeah.
Carl, you're on mute.
Carl, you're on mute. Still muted.
No, you're still muted.
Muted, Carl.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What I was saying is the May 5th is fine. We can talk to the folks at CubTech this afternoon about that.
Thank you.
Take care of that. So let me see if this bit of wordsmithing helps here. So after I say that the assessment will be fixed, for the next 10 years, I can amend my motion to say after which, that's after the 10 years, after which the property will be reassessed in the normal course of real estate property assessment by the town of Trumbull, and any resulting increase in assessment shall be phased in equally over the remaining fiscal years of 2035, 36 through 2044, 45. Does that seem to cover whatever goes on in that second 20 years?
When you say equally, am I misunderstanding? So how do you address in that the sliding scale?
So for instance, we after the 10th year, there's a reval
Right?
and there's an increase, let's say $1 million assessment increase that gets implemented
Oh, each year,
at
right?
$100,000 for each of the next 10 years. And let's say in 2015, there's another $1 million uptick. My language contemplates that that's going to get phased in
Right.
over 5 years. So that's going to go up by $200,000 years 16 through 20.
So should the language also refer to the declining schedule?
Well, I think I think Carl's language addresses that, but it's not for those who are, a third party reading this may not get it. So do we want to add a clarifying that it's phased in equal installments for the avoidance? Now I'm drafting the agreement, but basically you want to say that in year one of the phase in, you will pay 10% of the increase in taxes. In year two, you will pay 20% of the increase in taxes, and et cetera. So to make it clear.
Yes, some kind of reference to the change,
Well, I would say that my language covers a 20-year period, that whenever there will be a revaluation after the 10th year. But anything that happens after that, which is unpredictable, it's covered by this language. Now, if in the actual tax abatement agreement, they want to put in that scale, to clarify this, they could do that.
Yeah, but I think to Rita's point, there's two parts here. One is the assessed value is phased in over the remaining 10 years, and that assessed value can change over the 10 years. But then there's an abatement amount that has to get, the taxpayer's obligation for tax increases shall be abated in accordance with a certain property tax abatement agreement by and between the town and the taxpayer. Right. So I do think, that there's two parts that have to be addressed in your motion. It's the assessment and then the abatement.
And just if I could, are we saying that any improvement that's made over the first 10 years is not going to be recognized in that second 10 years?
No.
It's not going to be recognized in the first 10 years.
Right.
In the second 10 years, with the reval after the 10th year, it would be recognized.
Yep.
And phased in.
Less the phasing. Okay.
And then any other improvements that occur in the second 10-year period, by my language, is going to be phased in over the remaining years in that second 10-year period.
Okay.
It's, if I think my language is sufficient to get the point across if in the agreement. See, the difficulty I'm having is that we don't know if or when there's going to be any improvements in the second 10-year period. And not knowing when that occurs, you'd almost have to have a scale for year 11, a separate one for 12, a separate one for 13, because you have a declining number of years of benefit. And an increasing amount of assessment as the second 10 years elapse. And I don't, to put that into motion, we'd have to, have 10 different charts.
Carl, are we saying this the wrong way? Because the assessed value is what the assessed value is. It's at the end of the day, the taxpayer is paying an increasing amount over the 10 years on a percentage basis of the tax increase based on the assessed value. So the assessment, when you say the assessment is phased in, I don't think that's correct, because the assessment will be changing, as to your point. What is phased in is the taxpayer's obligation to pay the full amount of any tax increase year over year.
Yes.
The tax obligation is phased in, the assessment is not.
Correct.
Maybe I should just say that any resulting real estate tax increase will be phased in.
I'm just,
Will be
the property is assessed.
abated.
Yeah, beginning in year 11, the property is assessed in its normal course. Any corresponding obligation to pay tax increase in each fiscal year will be abated on a sliding scale, beginning fiscal year will be abated 90% beginning fiscal year whatever, and then phasing down will be phased into 0 over the next 10 years at 10% a year. Again, not articulate, but that's sort of the thrust.
Okay, after which the property will be reassessed in the normal course of real estate property assessment by the town of Trumbull, and any resulting real estate tax increase will be abated on a sliding scale
For each fiscal year.
Okay.
Uh,
Following this reassessment.
Yeah, you could say the obligation to pay the increase in real estate taxes for a given fiscal year shall be abated on a sliding scale. You can even refer, shall be abated on a sliding scale. Resulting in the obligation to pay taxes in full in year 10 or year 20, sorry, fiscal year 20.
If I make $1 million improvement to the property in year 15,
Yep.
I get abatement, it goes just for 5 years, the balance of that 20 years.
Whatever the assessment is, again, there's two columns here. There's the assessed value of the property and how much you have to pay percentage-wise of the tax increase. The percentage doesn't change. It's the number you're paying the percentage of that changes. So whatever the assessed value is, your obligation, however you want, the abatement decreases on a sliding scale over 10 years, or you can say the obligation to pay the tax increase increases on a sliding scale over 10 years.
But if I'm at year 15 when the improvement is made, or when the assessment goes up, do I have 5 years of sliding scale, or I'm not gonna have 10 years going forward. So I start at 50%, essentially.
Yeah, whatever. Again, if there's if the property is valued at $1 million in year 14, and then in year 15 it becomes 1.5, you're going to pay whatever percentage you're at on the sliding scale of the increase of the $500,000 increase.
Gotcha.
Is this going to be voted on tonight?
We have committee meeting, Maria. My guess is that it's going to be passed without recommendation to the full council next week at the May 5th.
Okay, so maybe in the meantime, we circulate the agreement to see if, everybody's in agreement with it. Does that make sense?
Which committee are you talking about? This one or the LNA committee tonight?
Well, this committee.
This one.
Circulate it with this committee, and
Well,
then,
I think we need to wordsmith this thing to finality right now.
okay,
But the agreement itself is then needs to be negotiated with their,
Yes.
I have to prepare it and then we have to negotiate. We're not gonna have it ready, I don't think we're gonna have a final agreement fully negotiated by next Monday's council meeting.
Well, we'll worry about that when we get there.
We would like to, but
Yeah.
these things don't usually happen that quickly. We'll try.
And I understand. I realize what we're putting you under. All right, so let's see if we can get back to the language here. So let me try to reread what I think we're hearing here. So again, after the 10-year period, after which the property will be reassessed in the normal course of real estate property assessment by the town of Trumbull, and any resulting tax increase will be abated on a sliding scale over the
In accordance with the,
You might want to say any resulting tax increase in each subsequent fiscal year shall be abated on a sliding scale. On a declining scale. Yeah, because with the abatement is declining.
What I'm trying to work back in here is that defining that second 10-year period. So if we are saying any real estate property property will be reassessed by the town of Trumbull, any resulting tax increases will be abated on a declining scale. Then I have to add in over the,
I would say for the periods,
for the periods fiscal years 2035, 36 through 2044, 45.
yeah, inclusive, yeah. I think that works.
Or any portion thereof. That would cover anything that's done after year 11.
Okay.
All right. All right, let me then do this. Let me restate my motion, which is to recommend a 20-year abatement agreement between the town of Trumbull and Cub Technologies, Inc., commencing with fiscal year 2025/2026, during which the real estate tax assessment on property known as 75 Merritt Boulevard, including subsequent improvements, will be fixed at the currently assessed rate of $3,691,100 through fiscal year 2034, 2035. After which the property will be reassessed in the normal course of real estate property assessment by the town of Trumbull, and any resulting tax increases will be abated on a declining scale for the fiscal years 2035, 36 through 2044, 45, or any portion thereof.
I think that works, Carl. The only word I would change is when you say the property is fixed at the currently assessed rate, I think that should be value.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So it's the restated motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Colahan. Do we have any further discussion? All right, hearing none, can we pass this by unanimous consent of the committee?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so that is passed. All right, is there any new business that we need to discuss before people turn into pumpkins on this fine Monday morning? All right, seeing none. When are we going to schedule our next meeting? Or do we need to have a next meeting? Or is our work done for the time being?
Why don't we leave it subject to how Cub Technologies reacts and how the council committee and council acts.
Okay, so
There
we
can be
will,
more developments, if Dan starts having conversations and we need to come back to us. But I think we may not have to meet again.
all right, so we will,
I'm sorry to interrupt. How does approval of minutes work if you don't have another meeting?
you can, Gia, you can circulate the minutes to the committee and we can approve by written consent.
Thank you.
I will I will send you what we have done with this motion.
Thank you.
Okay, I have out of agenda items. We will leave the next meeting open, so we're not going to schedule anything for now. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I just, I'm sorry, I know we all have to adjourn, but tonight's meeting, Carl and Jason, are you going to speak to this? Do you want me to speak to it? I mean, I'm not clear on the process tonight. I think it's just educating them initially. How are we gonna?
It's up to you, Rena. I'm on the LNA committee, so I'm happy to speak to it as a member. I can put on my tax partner committee hat and speak to the committee as such. However you want to do it. They may have questions for you, so I'm assuming you're going to be there anyway.
Oh yeah, I'll be there. I didn't know if the committee was, as chair, you were gonna present and I just back you up, or I'll get into it and you back me up. What?
Well, it is Gladys Knight in the Pips, so I'm happy to be a Pip if you would like. But if you want me to take the lead again, I'll do that as well.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest, so I think I'm gonna give them some background on the company and how we got to this point, and then what we're generally speaking proposing, and then I'm gonna need some perspective from you all on the process and stuff like that, the deliberations.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll cover it.
Okay.
Very good. So we have a motion to adjourn. I didn't hear one.
So moved.
Second.
Second it.
Thank you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
You are adjourned. Thank you guys for
Gee,
your.
I'll see you in a few minutes.
Alrighty.
All right, I'll meet you
Bye.
outside. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.